Some interesting thoughts when it comes to how much a coach chooses to pay a top recruit. What did Kirby Smart say? That created a bit of a firestorm. Locked On SEC and the portal crossover edition starts now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into a crossover edition of Locked On SEC and the Portal. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is over at FanDuel.com. Welcome in our special guest, our buddy Brian Smith, our Locked On Recruiting Insider. We're going to talk a lot on the SEC and some big picture stuff as well when it comes to recruiting. Brian, welcome in, man. An interesting time of year here. May winding down. We're getting into those summer months. Recruiting class is really starting to take shape for some schools.
Yeah, right now it's full-on recruiting. This past weekend was the full first weekend where everybody started having visits. Auburn and Georgia, among others, had electric visit lists. There will be some commitments over the next week or so because of those visits, I'm sure. Heard some rumblings. We'll see what happens. Ironically, one of them might flip from Auburn to Georgia, and that is the nature of the SEC. Dog eats dog, and it just is what it is. So I expect a lot of commitments over the next week or so. Then May 30th is one of the biggest weekends of the year. If you follow recruiting, that weekend will be massive.
Well, let's dive into it, Brian. I did want to get your thoughts as one of the big top recruits in Jackson Cantwell recently announced his commitment to the Miami Hurricanes. It was a reported NIL deal with, depending on what you read, upwards of $2 million per year. But I know a lot of the recruiting services had Georgia pinned as the favorite to land him, and thus, some of us were surprised when Miami came up and got him. But it was the quote from Kirby Smart a couple days ago where he said, "I just want to be able to have a freshman come in and not make more than a senior." And it's an interesting take because some coaches seem to have kind of drawn lines here saying, I'm not paying a 17-year-old who's never played a down of college football more than my dude who's been here 4 years, gutting it out, who's become a star player for me, more money than him. And that's a very interesting angle. I just wanted to pose it to you. What do you make of Kirby's quote there?
I agree with the theory. And if you look at the teams in the Final Four to Final Eight last year, the majority of them kind of follow that line. Like Kirby, dislike Kirby, whatever. He's obviously a great coach. His roster management has been tremendous in terms of finding the right fits. And one of the things that they've done is, hey, we're not going to overpay and upset the other guys in the locker room. It's obviously working for them. I think it's a pretty good model. There are some exceptions. Like if they'd have got Arch Manning, they would have paid more. There's an exception player here or there. You could say that Cantwell is that guy. He's as good an offensive tackle as I've ever watched in high school. Great kid, too. And not many of them in his personality frame bench over 500 pounds. It's insane what he's able to do physically. But I get it. Like if you bring in a kid and pay $1.5 to $2 million a year and he hasn't even taken in consideration the kid's not been at practice yet, how does that impact your locker room, man? I'm like Kirby. That scares me very, very much. I don't blame Kirby for saying it. Now, there's some sour grapes there, too, because I heard that the kid told him he was coming, but then he went to Miami. That's going to stick in your craw because that's a generational player. He's going to walk in and start. So he's going to take somebody's job. But still, his point is that, can I pay somebody that hasn't even put on a dog's helmet yet? That kind of money? I think Kirby's in the right to say it, and it's going to ruffle feathers. I get it. But I understand his point completely.
Yeah, and I had somebody ask me, the thoughts on it. And I said, well, think of this. Where did Kirby come from? He came from Nick Saban. Why? Right. I mean, they're literally on the same wavelength. And look, it's not don't pay players. They're fine with players making money. But it is a great it's a great argument because you go back to that Texas A&M class from a couple of years ago that Jimbo Fisher signs the #1 class. And ultimately, it blew up in his face. I mean, some of those kids went on to be stars elsewhere, didn't even stay at A&M. So it's a gamble to pay big money for that freshman to come in who may or may not play versus the upperclassman who's busting his ass for you and getting, less money. I think back to last year, there was a case of LSU. I want to say it was Dominic Williams, the big D lineman from TCU that ended up at Oklahoma. Right. And he was at the dollar figure he was asking for was pretty close to what LSU was paying Will Campbell, a future top 10 draft pick on the offensive line. Like, I get Brian Kelly drew a line in the sand and said, dude, we need D-line help, but I can't bring you in and pay you what Will Campbell's making. Like, there's going to be hell to pay for him. So it's an interesting debate.
I get it. And look what happened to Oklahoma last year. I mean, their defense was pretty good, but like some of that money could have went to some offensive players too. They probably could have used that. I don't disagree with Brian Kelly either. He obviously knows roster management, having worked at Notre Dame and LSU. Those are two pretty unique places. I'm in line with him as well. You're going to take a risk if you do that. And ask Mike Norvell. I know it's ACC, but how did paying guys from the portal work out for Florida State last year? It's the worst one season to the next in major college football history. It is non-negotiable. The portal / more importantly, NIL canned them. It caused, from what I was told, some ruffles in the background, and then some guys got big heads on top of it, and it just spiraled into a life of its own. So that's what Kirby's worried about. That's what Brian Kelly's worried about. Do you blame him? I don't.
Yeah, I think that's the fine balance. Is you can't go all portal, you can't go all recruiting these days. You got to have a fine balance of the both. And, maybe it's majority recruiting and only a couple guys from the portal, or maybe it's, some really big studs in recruiting and a bunch of portal guys, kind of like Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin are doing. But either way, you can't just go one or the other. It's got to be a fine balance of both. And look, you're going to have misses in recruiting and you're going to have misses in the portal as well. I wanted to get your thoughts, Brian, on the other quote that Kirby Smart went on to elaborate. He said, I'd like for other sports to be able to still survive. We're on the brink of probably 1 or 2 years away from a lot of schools cutting sports. What's the pushback going to be then? And here's where we are with the revenue sharing, right? All this great money coming in to the athletic program, and then they're writing a check for all these other non-revenue generating sports to be able to flourish, like women's tennis, like soccer, like, the list goes on and on. Name your sport, track and field. I've been told by a couple people that work at universities here in recent weeks that they think the cuts are already starting to be made. Instead of taking that private jet, maybe we'll all fly coach, on a flight. And, maybe that plane ride, the hour away trip, we'll just take a bus now to kind of save some money. So I think programs are already thinking about cost-cutting measures to keep the expenditures down for those smaller sports. But what do you make of his thought that 1 to 2 years, maybe we start cutting these? And this is where Title IX is going to become a big problem, because you can't just cut women's soccer and not have repercussions, but it becomes a money game here.
You're absolutely right. Title IX is always the fly in the ointment. It's not that it's intended, but it is, because you got to have as many women's scholarships as you do men, and you're already in the hole 105 every year because it's called football. So that means wrestling, men's cross country, stuff like that, the fencing, anything that has a scholarship. If it's not baseball, basketball, or football, maybe track. 10 years from now, we won't have those sports for men. Bowling team or something? No way. There won't be any scholarship money for any of those. They will all be club. And a lot of them are anyway. Wrestling's been one that's been hit for years. It's toast. He's not wrong. I saw somebody comment on X that eats sour grapes over Jackson Cantwell. That's not about Jackson Cantwell. That's NIL in general, where money's going and how the sports are being, part of the pay for play that Congress is involved. That probably makes him nervous, and I don't blame him. I don't trust Congress with anything. But how could you? Anyway, the bottom line is there's a lot to be concerned about. And it makes me wonder if guys like Kirby are going to last a lot longer, sadly, because they don't want to deal with somebody else's mess, but they're responsible for it because now they got to go coach that roster, deal with the financial repercussions, etc. I don't blame him for being mad. If I was in his shoes or any Division I head football coach, I'd feel that way. But Kirby's also making $13 million. What about the guy that's the GA somewhere, just trying to get into the fold? Man, this firestorm those guys are walking into, the pressure for them to produce. They got a small window, and they might cut back on even football coaches pretty soon. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this, and it's not a very pretty path.
one more thought here before we move on to something else. Jackson Cantwell, I believe it was Dog Nation, caught up with him after he made his decision. And, they asked him kind of to a point of, obviously NIL played a factor here. And he kind of poo-pooed it and said, oh, no, this is all about the relationships with the coaches and Mario Cristobal. And I love this coaching staff. I don't doubt that. But I also think, Brian, it's not taboo anymore. Like, I think players, it's okay to come out and say, yeah, and this school gave me more money. Like, I think it's okay to say that, yet it still feels taboo. And some of these players are, no, it was about the tradition and the future, the vision of the program and stuff like that. It's like, okay, and it's the money. It's okay to say that now.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was at the Rivals camp in Atlanta this past weekend, and there's a young quarterback to Georgia, and a bunch of other schools have offered. He was talking to somebody, and he said, money will play a part of it, but, I want to build relationships. He had the guts to openly say, hey, this is a part of the deal. That's the era we're in. I'm like, this kid's got some foresight. Yes, it's going to make a deal. This is a kid that's got an offer from Georgia and Ohio State within a 24-hour period. He's obviously good. So anyway, the point is, if you're not saying it, we still know it. Don't try to hide it, man. It's all good. And if you got paid, good for you. I don't care if it's Cantwell or anybody else. It's okay to say it, but relationships should be and development should be the key factors. And I know Cantwell, he's a great guy. I'm sure that's a major, major reason, but seeing the check clear is okay too. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I had somebody trying to argue on, I think it was on our YouTube page about, Georgia's offensive line underachieved last year. Maybe Cristobal is going to develop offensive linemen better. I'm like, well, Georgia, for not developing those dudes, they all went, second, third, fourth round picks?
I know, it's weird.
I mean, they didn't develop, but they still got drafted high. So, hey, I mean, there's always that too in playing at Georgia. So, anyway, it just kind of caught my eye. All right, when we return here on a crossover edition of Locked On SEC and the Portal, we'll get to some of what the current teams are doing in the SEC, and namely those ones at the bottom. What the heck are you doing, some of these schools? We'll talk about that next here on our crossover edition. Hey, but first, I want to remind you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. And look, the NBA playoffs are in full swing. And of course, look, every night is delivering some highlight-worthy plays and performances and big momentum shifts, can't miss moments. And whether it's game-winning shots or breakout players, there's never been a better time for you to get in on the action. And that is over at FanDuel, and they are taking care of you and getting you set up and making it very easy for you guys to stay in the game before tip-off. And with player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Again, if you feel good about a certain team a certain way, it's great to see these 4 NBA teams that, 3 teams have never won a title before, and then one of them in the Knicks who haven't won since the Nixon administration. So some great odds on some of these fun teams to bet on if you want to just take a winner straight up, or like you said, you want to get in on some of those player props. They got it all up there for you at FanDuel. You can get in a same game parlay, and hey, you can get a $200 bonus in bets. That'll add to the excitement if your first $5 bet hits. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com. Place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And we continue on here with our buddy Brian Smith, a crossover edition of Locked On SEC and the Portal, talking a little bit on specifically the SEC and recruiting. And Brian, there was a story that came out just a couple days ago on the SEC schools being major money spenders in recruiting. No surprise there. AL.com's Matt Stahl putting this out there, but pretty surprising that it was not Georgia, not Alabama, not A&M, not LSU, but Tennessee at the top of the fiscal year for 2024 last year, spending $5.3 million. Bama spent $5.2 million. And then everybody else, A&M and Georgia were in the $4 million range, and everybody else was below that. I got to think that was mostly a big part of the Nico Iamaleava deal, right?
I would assume that's part of it. I would assume the other part is in-state. Tennessee doesn't have the same luxury that Bama or Georgia do. State recruiting is a big deal. Like Georgia could get 80% of their class in-state every year and have a top 3 class. It's just Georgia's number 1 in the country per capita to the NFL. That's a good state. So that's part of it. I'd say Tennessee's going to get 6-8 kids in state, so they got to scour the country a little more. And I also think they're just trying to play catch up. Their fans have waited a long time, and they're on that cusp. They want to get over to the top. They're trying to do everything they can to really have great official visits, spending tons of money on it, luxury hotels and all that stuff for family. But the Nico deal, I'm sure any quarterback that comes in, et cetera, they go all out because they're probably not going to have the exact same roster as UGA and Bama. They don't want to say that out loud, but if you're not good at quarterback there, you're not going to beat those schools.
Yeah, some of the teams that were ranked kind of near the bottom, surprising Auburn would rank near the bottom at 1.4 million. It seems like they perhaps are maybe spending a little bit more in that category heading into 2025. But I wanted to get to a couple of teams that are not, maybe pulling their weight so far when it comes to recruiting. And as we look at it right now, I say, what is happening in the class of 2026? When I look at the top and see a team like USC has 27 recruits already committed for the class of 2026. They're the number one class on the 24/7 Sports Composite. But at the bottom of the conference, Brian, Kentucky has one commit, Mizzou has one commit, and Florida has 2 commits. I just look at that and say, what the heck is going on there?
Well, first things first, a dead rat could recruit to Florida. That is criminal. But then again, how they've coached there has been criminal, and players are leery. They want to know that the guy they commit to will be there for at least 2 or 3 years. Do we know if Billy's going to be there past late November, early December? Probably not. So they've tried, and they've got an incredible visit list set up through like into May through June 13th weekend. But how many are they going to get pledged? Like they just got their second commitment. It was a kid who was kind of surprised. He's from Glenville High School in Cleveland, of all places, 360-pound nose guard that everybody thought was going to Ohio State. So it shows you they have a lot of power when they get kids on campus, but they still have 2 commits. Now, Kentucky, not a football program that's known for its recruiting. That's a basketball school, but still 1, and it's an offensive lineman in state. That's just bad. And then Missouri with all their NIL power, and it's really good. And they got that special deal in state, Chris. They have 0 in-state commitments. How is that possible? You're one of the better programs in the SEC. And you're putting guys in the NFL. You just had a top 10 NFL draft pick at offensive tackle. They got 1 kid committed, a quarterback from Pennsylvania. So all 3 of those schools have failed so far. There's no nice way to say. Here's the other thing. Of all schools that shouldn't be doing well, it's Arkansas. All the talk about Sam Pittman, they got 14 kids committed. If you put in effort, good things happen, Chris. It's amazing how that works.
Well, and it's funny, too. I wonder, if we had our buddy Brandon Olson on who does Locked on Gators, I wonder what he would say. And maybe he would argue that Napier and them have been so focused on the portal and building up this team for 2025 that maybe they haven't shifted the focus yet to 2026. But it's crazy, Brian. I'm looking at the 24/7 Sports Composite. Kentucky ranks 85th. Mizzou ranks 84th currently in recruiting. Florida ranks 73rd behind the likes of San Diego State, Nevada, and San Jose State. And then what's the kicker here is the team that's ranked 35th is Vanderbilt. The Commodores have 8 commits already for the class of 2026. Clark Lee's going, man, we're building off of that year we had just last year. That is wild, and never, Brian, should we ever see the Vanderbilt Commodores ranked ahead of the Florida Gators in recruiting.
No, not especially past the midway point of the month of May. I mean, Clark Lee's done a great job. It's his alma mater. He loves it there. He really wants to be there. Those are all great points. But should Vanderbilt be competitive with Florida in recruiting? No, it's not realistic. But right now they're kicking Florida's butt. I never thought I would murmur those words out of my mouth. And I'm sure you never thought you would think about it either. So this is recruiting in 2025. Anything goes in the SEC, buddy. Anything at all.
I'm looking, Brian, at the Alabama Crimson Tide. They are ranked down at 40th right now. Certainly not where you want to be if you're Kalen DeBoer and company, but that one feels like that's probably going to come up here pretty quickly, right? I would think a lot of names coming Alabama's way here.
Yeah, they just offered a quarterback out of Nebraska they got a shot at that they really like, and they've got a couple of kids that got a chance to get in state. They're elite players, as Xavier Kroll, They got a chance at maybe the best pass rusher in the South, et cetera. They finally turned their attention to the linemen, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi. Their official visit list over the next few weekends is tremendous. Alabama may make the most meteoric rise of any school, not currently in the top 30. They could be in the top 8 by the end of June, if not top 5.
I saw Texas is sitting at number 25 right now with 8 commits. That's another school. Yeah, I've seen name after name after name saying, I'm coming to campus. Yep. I'm coming to visit. So yeah, it feels like Sark's going to start doing some work here real soon.
Yeah, I was actually with somebody that I asked to take a picture of him yesterday at an event, and I didn't ask him to do any signs or anything, and he put up the hook 'em sign before I even asked him where he was going. I'm like, okay, well, that takes care of my next question. I'm just going to leave it at that. But this is a national elite recruit. They're doing a very good job. And this was an out-of-state kid. When Texas gets out-of-state players that are elite kids, look out. And right now they've got their hand in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, all over the place. Texas could end up with the top class again. It would not surprise me.
I look at Tennessee. They're sitting at 30th right now with 7 commits, and obviously it's headlined by the one of the top quarterbacks in Faison Brandon, who's committed there. But has there been any in the recruiting circles you've been in, Brian, and talking with kids? Has there been any negative feedback on what transpired with the Nico Iamaleava stuff? Because it feels like for the most part, everybody's on Josh Heupel's side in that argument on you weren't going to be held hostage by Nico and give him this exorbitant amount of money. But I just bring that up because it just doesn't seem like it's affecting Tennessee on the recruiting front one way or the other.
It didn't bother Faison. It hasn't bothered any of the other kids. Like I was with a couple of guys that are either being recruited heavily by Tennessee and one that was committed. No problem at all. Heupel and his staff are pretty open-minded about discussing everything with kids, and I think they're respected for it. And amen. I mean, if you're honest with people, things usually go your way in the long term. And like I was Gabriel Ascenda is an offensive tackle they have committed at a Baylor school in Chattanooga. He's tremendous. He had nothing but good things to say, and I guarantee he has a lot of money offers coming his way. As we both know, Chris, how many good offensive tackles are in the portal? 1, maybe 2 a year. That's why you got to pay the high school kids like this Ascenda kid. He's 6'7", like 320, a lot of money, and he's earned it. And like he's going to stick with Tennessee. He's happy, so I think they're doing just fine.
All right, when we return here, Brian, we need to get to some of the top uncommitted quarterbacks because quarterbacks have all been kind of shored up, but there's one big name out there who's looking at a couple of SEC schools, and we'll talk about where he needs to land. We'll talk about that next right here on a crossover edition, Locked On SEC and the Portal. Continue on here, our crossover edition of Locked On SEC and the Portal. Chris Gordy and Brian Smith. And Brian, I look at all the top quarterbacks out there for the class of 2026. We talked about Faison Brandon from Tennessee. He's right up there at the top. Jared Curtis, the big one that committed to Georgia just a couple of weeks ago. Thea Bell's been hanging tough with Texas for a while, it feels like. But one of the kids that's up there is Bowe Bentley, number 7 quarterback in the country. And he's named his 2 finalists, basically. It's LSU and Oklahoma. And when I look at it, Oklahoma already does have a quarterback commit for this class in Jaden O'Neal, and he's rated a 3-star, number 18 quarterback in this class. But I look at it, Brian, say, I'm running through all these quarterbacks, and LSU ain't got one. So I start to look at it and go, this almost feels vital for Brian Kelly and company to land a top quarterback like this. And look at the track record from Joe Burrow to Jaden Daniels. They've had some Heisman Trophy winners. We'll see what Garrett Nussmeier does this year. That almost feels like a no-brainer if you're LSU and trying to sway the Texas kid, Bowe Bentley.
Yeah, it looks like it's Oklahoma or LSU. He plays at Salina High School just north of Dallas. Won a state title the first year he started. That's a great story. And he fits that run around and make plays kind of deal like Jaden Daniels. I'm not saying he's Jaden Daniels, by the way. But he's a phenomenal athlete. The weird thing here is he's Dallas area kid. He's an Oklahoma fan. Now, how Oklahoma does this year, this could be one of those deals. Even if he commits to Oklahoma, is that done? What if that staff doesn't make it? Like, there's so many little tentacles to this. And I don't think, I know some people say, oh, Brian Kelly's on the hot seat. I need to see that before I, believe it. I think they're going to be really good this year. But LSU needs a quarterback in this class. And I don't know who they're going to get if they don't get Bowe Bentley. They're looking at Jake Fett, trying to flip him from Arizona State too. I don't think that's going to happen. But you would think with a team that throws it around as much as LSU does, and they're going to be explosive this year. If they don't get Bentley, they don't get Fett. I don't know. It would be weird, but I don't know who the quarterback's going to be. So you're absolutely right, Chris.
Yeah, and you look at the class they have, they've already got some of the top wide receivers in the country committed. So it's like, it just would make sense. Like, how do you have all these stud wide receivers and you don't have the quarterback to go with them yet? So almost feels like a no-brainer. I did want to get your thoughts on Landon Duckworth, because that one's kind of been quiet. I haven't heard much on him. An Alabama kid who, some folks think Ole Miss. There's some who still think South Carolina's in play. What are you hearing the latest on Landon Duckworth?
I spoke to him a little over a month ago, and I spoke to some people since. Ole Miss was the school that he had the best relationship with as of his time at the Elite 11 in Atlanta. That's a little over a month ago. He really likes Lane. He likes the staff. He's comfortable there, and he's visited multiple times. Obviously, a mobile quarterback for Kiffin's offense is all but a must. Great fit. Alabama's not recruiting him. Auburn wasn't after him super hard early on, but now they've really upped the ante. They're going to have him and the other quarterback, Mr. Burgess. He plays at a great program, Grayson High School in Georgia. I saw him this past weekend as well at Rivals Camp in Atlanta. They're both going to be at Auburn May 30th weekend. We'll see what happens, but you're probably only going to take one, and it'll be one of the two, I would guess. But I don't think there's any doubt that it could go either way, because NC State and North Carolina are in on Burgess as well. Florida State, South Carolina is definitely in it for Duckworth. So we've got all that stuff going on back and forth. It could go a lot of different directions. The May 30th weekend will probably tell us a lot, though. Auburn is kind of in the middle of it.
You mentioned Alabama in there, and they don't really have, I was looking at this 2026 class, and it doesn't really look like any of these high recruits. But is that just a circumstance of you bring in a Keelan Russell, and everybody's expecting? I mean, he's going to be the guy, for a couple of years. Same thing with Deuce Knight at Auburn. Like, you bring in a highly touted recruit like that, the writing is on the wall. That's the dude who's up next, right?
That makes it really hard. They just, like Alabama, and I'm probably going to butcher this kid's name, Jet Tamala. He's from Millard South, just outside of Omaha. Not a normal Alabama recruiting grounds, but he threw for a bazillion yards last year, like 50 touchdowns or something like that. He's got a good stroke. He's got the kind of mental capacity to run an offense that's going to be a little more complicated like Bama does. Maybe you bring him in, redshirt, and go through the process. And Keelan Russell's probably 3 and out. So really the next guy's got, if you redshirt, you could be a 2-3 year starter, but most kids want to play right away. Probably not going to beat Keelan out. So I'm with you. That makes it really hard to get a high-ranked 4-star, 5-star kid. This might be the smart play for Kalen DeBoer and his staff. Take a kid you can develop that'll be patient. It's better for your roster long-term.
Yeah, and it's just kind of funny when you look around. Like Diabell, who's been committed to Texas for a while, there is the world where Arch Manning is one and done. He's the first time full-time starter and hits the draft. Now, a lot of people said, oh no, he's likely to come back for another year. We'll see on that front. But South Carolina, who's in on Duckworth, I think they just brought in Air Nolan through the portal, and he's a guy who's going to sit and wait his turn behind Lenore Sellers. So, you can't help but do the dominoes. But I think gone are the days, Brian, of the whole, we recruited this kid. He's going to sit here and he's going to wait his turn for 2-3 years. And the portal's changed all that.
Yeah, it makes it difficult. Most kids get ticked if they're not starting their sophomore year. And especially at quarterback, I can tell you most college coaches have zero interest in starting true sophomore, Keelan Russell aside. Except for that extravagant player, there just aren't many that are ready for the stuff above the shoulders. And that's just the way it is, man. I mean, like Tom Brady didn't even hit the field at all till like his junior year. Tom Brady. So that kind of puts it in perspective. So I know these kids are impatient, but just hopping in the portal is probably not your better option than waiting your turn at Bama. But what do I know?
Last thing, Brian, anything you're hearing on some of the big, uncommitted names at this point? I'm looking at, at least, the composites got, Felix Ojo, the lineman, from the state of Texas. They think he's going to be a UT guy. Lamar Brown, the D lineman from Baton Rouge, they think he's going to be at LSU. Xavier Griffin from Gainesville, linebacker, they think he's going to be Alabama. So, some of these are already all crystal balled already, but any big things happening here with some of these big name guys?
Well, I'll give you a couple. Lamar Brown, when I met with him in New Orleans at the Under Armour camp, he was honestly pretty open. A&M led at one point, LSU's involved, Miami, etc. He's a kid that could go to a lot of places. He's very open-minded. He's looking at development. He's from Baton Rouge, though. So the easy, low-hanging fruit is, he's just going to go to LSU. Well, the stud safety that plays at Catholic just committed to Ohio State. And he's from Baton Rouge Catholic. So you got to be careful about that. The other thing is, I was with Aaron Gregory this past weekend, kid from Georgia, committed to Texas A&M, which is bizarre within itself. Probably a top 5 national receiver, but he said Texas, Georgia, and LSU are still coming after him. And he didn't say that he wasn't going to take visits. And I think that's a lot of the same thing. Let the visits play out. And by July 4th, these questions will all be answered for the most part. 80% of these kids will have picked a school. I think that we're like I said early in the show, we're at the very beginning of it. We're just getting started. The May 30th weekend, June 6th, June 13th, June 20th, all those weekends, you're just going to see a plethora of commitments. We are now in recruiting time.
That's why we will continue to check in with Brian throughout these next couple of weeks. A lot of stuff will start heating up on the recruiting front across the SEC and across all of college football. So we thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. For your second listen, hey, if you checked out Locked On SEC, check out the Portal Show with Brian, and vice versa. Of course, Brian Smith keeping you up to date with all the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chris Gordy. For Brian Smith, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow right here on a crossover edition of Locked On SEC and the Portal.